Hi, I'm Jamie Moyer with Steelcase, and I am in our Learning and Innovation Center here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's a space that we also call Steelcase University. I wanted to take you through a couple of new classroom spaces that we are experimenting with, share a little bit about the research that Steelcase Learning is doing into these active learning environments, and pose a few questions for you to think about for your own campuses. Would like to start in our Zoom room. We took a number of our classrooms around the building and have rethought them based on some of our pandemic findings, also thinking about the opportunity to create better high flex learning environments, or thinking about some of the learnings in these spaces. Maybe we scale them down and they become the right conference rooms or collaboration spaces or training rooms for some of your administration teams or your staff on campus. So I want to take you in this first space. There's some different things that we're experimenting with, thinking about pedagogy, technology in space. Thinking about technology, even when you're coming into a space, how easy is it to be able to start up? How do you get the monitors on, the speakers on, the microphones on? We are working with Logitech using their tap system so we can hit one button and automatically start up and be in our class or our meeting. So again, monitors turn on, microphones and speakers turn on. We are in that Zoom session or that Teams session with class. Think about some of your own conference rooms on campus, some of your own classrooms. How easy is it to get everything up and running and get started? I've had a few other universities in that will tell us, okay, well, on the lectern, we've got a 10-step checklist. And then at the end, it says call IT. So you're just thinking about ease of startup in this space. The room we're in right now is the most flexible one that we are experimenting with. So we're thinking about how mobile is it for your faculty that like to say, face forward, let's get into lecture mode, or let's circle up for a discussion, or let's break out into teams. Does it work for that, or does the furniture get in the way and becomes more of a barrier? We are experimenting with technology, monitors on a front and back wall, cameras on the front and back wall. We're wondering, do we like to see content in multiple places? The way we have our room set up is that if you have remote participants, you would see their faces on the left-hand panel, and then on the right-hand side, you would see content. In some of our spaces, we're really thinking about equity, ease, and engagement. On the equity side, if you're the on-campus participant versus online, do you still feel like you have a seat in class? Do you feel like you can engage with content? Can you engage with your peers? And we found it's just creates such a better experience when you can see the remote participants on one panel. You can see if they're trying to raise their hand. Are they nodding along with you? Are they kind of wondering what you're sharing? So just creates a little bit better experience. You really feel like you have a seat in class. Being able to see is really important, but being able to hear is even more important. So what we're doing in one of our classrooms, because we wanted to see if it made a difference, is it something that we felt was important, was taking one wall and doing acoustic tile on it. That completely surprised us. Remote participants will tell us this room gives them the best auditory experience out of any of the spaces. So that was a surprise when you're in a room with carpet, maybe high quality ceiling tiles, that in some of your spaces, especially if you're dealing with hard floors and block walls, think about some easy, low cost improvements you can make to the experience, and just adding some acoustic material made a really big difference for the remote participants. Again, thinking about how is it a more equitable experience? How are they able to hear the discussion, hear the instructor without a lot of reverberation or echo? So some things that we're experimenting with in there. As we're thinking about different postures or different zones in the room, again, think about whether it's right to make things mobile. Should things be more fixed? Is it a one student desk? Should it be set up for groups? How flexible do you want it? So wanted to take you through some different ideas today, get you thinking about attributes of a space that might be important for you, and not necessarily saying, hey, let's copy and paste any of our classrooms into your spaces around campus. So thinking about student areas, also thinking about the instructor space in class. Is there a big fixed podium? Is there a need for such a fixed element as you start to maybe decrease some of the technology needs in the room? Or is there need to have a fixed piece, but does it make sense that there might be some things that your instructors could move around the room and being able to control how tall they want it? Does it become their desk? Does it become their lectern? Is this something for students to be able to use and move around the space as needed? So a few different things to think about with that. Love to get into a discussion again about flexibility, and group size. So intentionally tried to bring a few different things into this room. Makes for some great debate, especially if you get to visit us in person ever, which we would love to do. But thinking about, again, how much footprint does an item in a classroom take up? Is it important for you to be able to get student backpacks up off the floor? Is it important that in a few seconds you might be in a different configuration and be able to move around? Or do you prefer to have more surface area in a room? Thinking about what students are actually bringing into the space. Does it make more sense to have more of a table type of environment? Are you ever trying to use the floor space in different ways in your room? Would you like to be able to fold up a table and move it, maybe have a robotics activity going on, or have a mindfulness moment and maybe you're doing something else where students are seated on the floor, or maybe just circling up their chairs and having more of a seminar discussion. So some things to think about with flexibility with the furniture. Or maybe you're thinking, okay, maybe I need a smaller footprint pieces. Maybe I need the ability to stack, but I still like the idea that students could get their backpacks up off the floor, get things. So it's a little bit easier to move when you're having them in different configurations. So I wanted you to think about some of the different elements in the room. And then also think about your own learning environments. What is happening on the walls of the space? Depending on where you might have windows or views to daylight. Do you have technology on the surfaces? Do you like wall-mounted marker boards? Do you like things that might be able to move? Maybe that you could take off a wall and take with you to your office or take out into a hallway space. So I wanted to show you a few of the different attributes that we're experimenting with in this room. Again, thinking about technology being in multiple places, some of those views of the room. If we were to circle up the furniture in here, then it starts to make a lot more sense why we might see content on one wall that is also on the wall behind us. Think about flexibility in your space. Think about camera angles. Think about acoustics in the area. Think about how much flexibility you need for the instructor. And then also thinking about whiteboards, some of the low-tech tools that are really important in this space. So that was our Zoom room. Wanted to start in that space. And then I'll take you to one additional room. Have a few different rooms we're experimenting with. So I'll just give you a sneak peek today of a few of the spaces and would love for you to come back for a more in-depth tour virtually via camera like we're doing right here, or ideally in person if you could get to Grand Rapids, Michigan. The building we're in, we have 2/3 of our space dedicated to in-between areas, mirroring the research showing that 2/3 or more of how we learn really is done informally. So what happens before or after class? Are there places that you might connect with your fellow classmates and work on a project? Even during class, are there times where you might break out and need that collaboration space, or just thinking about, again, before and after class? Maybe you decide to jump into an online class. Do you have that space to go, or if you need a little bit, maybe more acoustic privacy, you can do that. Are you thinking about maybe a harder working space? Is it a desk height area for your laptop? Do you like that you might sit in a lounge furniture? What about really small footprint furniture, knowing that spaces on campus are always squeezed for real estate? So wanted you just thinking to get you thinking about some of those in between spaces that we have. We have been seeing a swing. So these collaboration spaces, but I've had more schools talking about the need for some of these small focus environments. Is that for faculty to record a session? Is it more of that meeting area? Is it for students to jump in and take an online class? So there's some different type of spaces that we have around our own campus here. Again, range of spaces. Do you need acoustic privacy or visual privacy? Or maybe you need that idea of this pod, this room or office that you can just drop into an existing space. So I wanted to show you that as well. And I want to take you into one more classroom that we're calling our Learning Studio. I have a fake Teams meeting going on up there, so don't worry, we're not interrupting anyone right now. But this better shows you what the monitors would look like in that Zoom room we just came from, where if you were in a meeting or in a class, what if you could see your coworkers? What if you could see your students on one side and content on another? Again, such a great experience. The remote participants in spaces like this will tell us this feels so much better to them than just when you have one monitor in the front of the room and they feel like they're kind of coming down in and everyone's looking at them. They feel like they have much more of a seat in class with a space like this. So things to think about. Do you have anywhere on campus where you have side-by-side monitors and you have it set up where you have one side just dedicated to the participants? Could be something to think about. This room is not as flexible as the room we just came from, where everything was on wheels. The furniture in this room was created based on research we did into more dense environments. Our team spent a lot of time in New York City. And when we were doing that, we saw a lot of classes where we were still seeing active learning happening, but students were moving more than the furniture. So are there some spaces where it might make more sense to have a solution that might stay relatively in the same place all semester, but let your students roll around, sit side by side across the table from one another? Maybe you're going to pull 10 chairs up to this table, do a little bit of a reflection on an activity, and then have them roll back to their stations. So would love for you to think about a space like this. Do you think it's interesting to have more organic shapes, softer corners? If anyone's an engineer out there by background, sometimes we've heard that they were saying, hey, I need everything to line up. Where's my straight edges and 90-degree corners? So would love for you just to think about, hey, does this resonate? Is it interesting or not for me? So I wanted to show you some variation with the spaces that we are doing here. When we've had other education groups in, some have said, oh, okay, this space makes me feel more creative. Maybe this is a creative writing lab. We're seeing it in design thinking classrooms, or we're seeing it in library or learning commons spaces where it might work great for a group study for a table, or maybe you have a whole section where your instructor can bring a class into the space. So just wanted to give you a little idea of what you're seeing in the classroom kind of space here. And then on the walls, we're doing some similar things with the last classroom where we might have fixed marker boards. We might have items that we can move along a rail. We could grab those whiteboards out and put them on a mobile cart, or maybe you like to add them to a stand. Maybe groups want to wall themselves in so they have a little bit of privacy in what they're working on, or maybe you want to take that out into the hallway and show it in some different ways. So I wanted you to think about a few different ideas with that. The solutions in here come at a traditional desk height. You could do it at a lounge height, which I have over the sofa in the back here, or even thinking about doing a stand-up height, which we're using for the instructor station in here. But findings from some of our other classroom experiments, we would love if a couple of these larger tables were at standing height here. So think about tiering your furniture instead of tiering your architecture, and think about supporting different postures in class. Would love for you to think about power in your spaces. Do you have enough outlets? Our students always sitting by the wall so they can use the plugs. There's some different things we're doing in our spaces. We're intentionally not putting power in our tables here. We did want them to be a little bit easier, more flexible to move around if we need. We're using some different options where maybe we're using more of a vertical power pole solution that you can plug into, or the way I'm charging up my laptop right now is just one of our mobile power units right here, which when my lights run out, looks like I'm got a couple bars left. I might have been using this for a few days. I can take it to a charging pad around our building or one of these mobile carts and be able to just recharge it up or grab a new one if I need, and be able to connect in with USB-C or USB-A power and power up my spaces. That was just a little sneak peek into a couple of the experimental classrooms that Steelcase is doing. Again, there's a few additional spaces I haven't taken you today to, and we're also working on a new immersive learning studio type of space, which we will be ready to show soon. So we would love to host you and your team on a virtual visit or in-person visit, show you our spaces, again, share a little bit of what we're experimenting with, and ask you a ton of questions about what's going on in your own campus. What are you trying to do differently? What kind of feedback are you hearing from the students? So I want to give you a little sneak peek. Hope you are intrigued and would be interested in learning a little bit more. Talk to you later.